This YouTube channel is supported by some very good folks on Patreon. The channel has been going for just over a year, and for 8 of those months has operated at a loss, with an occasional month here and there turning profit. If you want to help the channel grow and continue, consider supporting on Patreon and sharing the channel with friends. Patrons get to see all of the finances, so you know where your money goes directly. Hello and welcome to this developer diary recap series for Imperator Rome. Around about each month I cover the latest developer diaries and post a video. There's so far as of recording been 17 diaries, and this will be the third video in the series. If you haven't checked out the others, please check the video cards, description and the playlist that links to the others. Without further delay, let's begin. Diary number 12, Technology. Now unfortunately in this developer diary, Johan didn't give us many great screenshots to decipher, presumably because this UI is still being worked on, but generally speaking, technology works in a pretty simple way that I'll try to explain as best as I can. There are 4 technology fields to advance through: martial, civic, oratory, and religious, again mirroring the 4 power resources in the game. You can assign a researcher to each field, giving them a loyalty buff and increasing the speed of research based on the finesse skill of the character. Typically, one level of research in any field will take about 15 years. This is slowed down the more pops you have in your empire, and it speeds back up through trade goods, characters, and inventions. More on inventions in just a moment. Technology fields don't actually grant you new technology, they're more like a generalized improvement. Completing a technology level increases a global buff to your empire in the field which gained the level. Currently, martial tech grants more morale for the military. Civic tech increases commerce, oratory tech increases civilization level, and religious tech increases omen power. Most importantly is that when any of the fields do complete a level, they reduce the cost of a new invention by 5%. So, inventions are something you can get at any time, and there's always 7 available that are semi-random in how they appear, but weighted to appear with an associated tech level. The base cost of any invention is 50 civic power. These are the actual technologies, so to speak. Every time you get an invention, you increase the civic power of the next one by 20%. So the more inventions you get, the more expensive it gets. The more research you finish, the less expensive it gets. And you should get some global buffs too with the research. So why not just tie research to inventions? Why are they separate? What's the reason behind that? Well, Johan explains that tying it to civic power, which is also used to set up trade routes and for moving pops, it creates a hard choice between having global weaker bonuses or stronger local bonuses. It sounds interesting, but we'll have to see how it pans out. Diary number 13, Politics for a Republic. This diary deals with a generalized republic as a government type. A republic has a senate. A senate has 100 seats and is made up of 5 factions, each with their own leader. The factions are split between military, civic, mercantile, and religious, which is just like the 4 main power resources, and then the extra one, populists. And depending on which faction your overall leader belongs to, they have different positive effects. Except for the populists, they don't have a direct benefit. The seats of the Senate change hands between factions over time, with the charisma of the current leader impacting the attraction of the seats. You can also spend oratory power to convince 10 seats to join a faction instantly, but this will in turn increase your tyranny. The Senate is something that you want to have on your side. They require approval for changing laws, a lot of major character interactions, and all diplomatic actions. If you have less than 40 seats of approval for an action, it's completely blocked. You just cannot do it. If it's less than 60, then you can force the action and again increase your tyranny. Now, assuming the action is 60 approval or more from the Senate, the action is clear to go. The Senate will approve an action depending on its own composition. For example, the military faction is likely to back wars, but even they will push against such a thing if war exhaustion is high or you have low manpower, basically if it's not in your favor. So let's say you're planning on doing some aggressive expansion. You'll need to start planting the seeds for military characters to be influential, to become the leading ruler of the militarist faction, and for that faction to have a strengthened position within the Senate, so your war is more directly under your control and morale is increased for the armies. Of course, you don't have to do all that, but that is an ideal setup for controlling a war. Now that's really all the info we get from this diary. This one feels like a 2-parter, continued in the next. I'm guessing some of you will have questions about how this relates to Rome, the consuls, the cursus honorum, and we'll get to all of that in just a sec. Diary number 14, Offices and Laws, again, for a republic. Johan kicks off by dropping a pretty substantial bombshell, and that is the fact that Rome has a leader called a consul, and that there's only ever one, and that they rule for 5 years. Now, most people with a passing interest in Roman history knows that there was always two consuls, and that they only ever ruled for 1 year, that they had to be at least 42, and if someone wanted to be a consul again, they had to wait about 10 years. Now, the consul could also veto the other consul's decision, so they had to agree to get things done. This is part of the reason Roman politics is so famous and so interesting. But unfortunately, this isn't the case in Imperator Rome. Instead, for gameplay reasons, you have one leader and they are there for 5 years, so effectively acting just like any other republic. There is a few responses from Johan and someone else on the team that are honestly far too long for this video to go over, but generally speaking they say that having a fully in-depth Roman Senate is just way too out of scope, and if they just hacked one in as a second consul office, they wouldn't be doing the cursus honorum system justice. Maybe perhaps we'll get a DLC that fleshes it out eventually, but having Rome in the name and not having two consuls or a deeper government system for Rome does seem pretty bad. I mean, there's just no way around it in my mind. I can understand why they think a fully in-depth Roman government system is out of scope, but you could have just went with a generalized representation of the system and it probably would have been fine. Now, it'll be interesting to see if modders can come up with a workable solution that maybe hits some sort of middle ground. I have some coding experience, so even I might take a stab at it. Anyway, the diary does go on to explain the different offices in government, which provide a series of buffs if you fill their seats. So there's 2 offices for each character attribute, so that's 8 in total, as each character has 4 attributes, and fitting the right characters in the right places will get the best out of them. Similarly, there are 8 categories of laws in a republic, each with 4 different laws inside of them, where only one can be active at any time. So as mentioned previously, you need the backing of the Senate to change these laws, and you'll also need 250 oratory power. Monarchies and tribes will have different laws, and modders have the option to create unique offices and laws as well, so a little bit of flexibility there. Diary number 15, Military Traditions. Military traditions are essentially another type of technology tree specific to the military. The type of military tradition tree that you start out with depends on the culture of the nation that you decide to play, with 7 different variants existing in the game. Now, each tree has 3 linear paths that you can progress through, each with 8 traditions in it. Johan gives examples of the barbarian tradition tree broken down into the Britannic path, the Germanic path, and the Gallic path. Now, you can choose to start with any path you like and begin another path if you wish at any time. But Johan states that it's not very likely you'll get to the end of all paths by the end of the game, so you have to think about which path you want to progress down first. Each tradition costs 800 military powers, the biggest we've seen so far, and increases the cost of the next tradition by 50%. After you get 7 of the traditions in one path, the 8th is unlocked for free as an end bonus, so that's kind of your carrot at the end of the stick to stick with one path. Each military technology level reduces the tradition cost back by 25%. So similar to technology tree and inventions, you need to gain military research to lower the costs of traditions. All in all, it's actually a pretty straightforward and simple little tech tree that seems to fit the theme of the nation you're playing. I'm kind of a little curious to see if 7 is enough to cover like all the cultures, and I'm sure probably more will be developed over time. Diary number 16, Roads, Unrest, and Civilization level. Johan tackles 3 smaller topics in this diary, starting off with roads. Roads are part of the Latin military traditions, halfway through the Roman path. When an army has at least 5 cohorts, and you have the tradition unlocked, then you can start building roads toward another city. Movement is delayed by the army by 20%, and morale is heavily reduced. When they arrive at the next city, a permanent road is established, granting 50% speed boost between these 2 cities forever. Now remember, cities are just the name for the smallest type of region, so you can literally connect every single region with roads with this system at no cost and no maintenance cost other than just needing an army to move between them at a slightly slower pace once. The benefit then from then on out just seems absolutely huge. A nice graphical touch, of course, is that the roads are then visible on the map to let you see at a glance where the movement benefit is. No word as of yet if other cultures can build roads. Next up is Unrest. Johan reveals that there are no rebels in Imperator Rome, instead there are civil wars. Unrest of a city impacts the loyalty of the province, which if low enough can cause a civil war or an independence war. Unrest seems to be affected by war exhaustion, stability, and then characters and army presence, and that's really all we know as of yet. Again, he's kind of being light on each of these topics. The last topic was civilization value, and Johan gave us just one line about it. Each nation will have a civilization level, which depends on their type of government and technology level. So presumably, this can be then increased the further into the game you get with technology. Now, each city will slowly increase or decrease to its owner's civilization level. So if your overall empire's civilization level is 10, then a city will try to reach 10. Now, what does civilization value do? Well, in Europa Universalis Rome, it used to spawn barbarian armies. We didn't hear much about what it does here, but the tooltip suggests that a city doesn't function as well as it could, and that perhaps a barbarian uprising could happen, though that is not yet confirmed. Diary 17, Characters Part 2. Yoan revisits characters in more depth for Diary 17. The previous diary that covered it was Diary number 7. This time it focuses on health, holdings, personal wealth, and interactions. So starting with health, characters have a health bar next to their portrait. The health bar ranges from 0 to 100, and if it reaches 0, you guessed it, the character dies. Health-related traits are acquired over a character's lifetime from disease and events and other things, and they almost always decrease their health over time. While I like this system in practice, with essentially lucky characters and healthy characters living the longest, I'm not a super fan of the health bar, though I guess it's good to know at a glance how long someone probably has left. Next up is a character's holdings. Essentially, a governor can pick a city within a province as the place they have their holdings. A general picks one from a city they may have conquered. Now, I'm not sure if this is automatic or manually assigned. Either way, a character with a holding will get income from that city until they die, or if they are forced to relinquish it. Now, for those unfamiliar, this is a personal wealth that the character keeps on them. It's separate to your empire wealth and the money you use to do things. Now, each character has their own pool of money that they use to their own benefit. Characters gain money if they're in office, or if they are a governor, or if they have holdings. So perhaps a general who is conquering places can also get one if they don't currently hold office. In Europa Universalis Rome, characters would use money to get out of jail, cause different events to occur, and even raise armies for you in times of sudden war that you then got to control, such as a civil war. It's not something you can directly spend or influence too much. The characters are semi-autonomous when it comes to how they use it. You can, however, use character interactions to ask for a loan, and then of course you'll have to repay them. On the interactions front, there is a large list of things you can do with characters, and the game seems to get really complex at this point in terms of granularity with characters. Overall, there's 19 character interactions listed at the moment in the game, and the interactions usually cost either power, gold, or need Senate approval to do, sometimes all three. We can see from the screenshot that characters have their own family ties, with a mother, father, spouse, friends, and rivals all listed. This is again similar to EU Rome, but for me, I found that to be a really bad way to keep track of my characters, because you have quite a lot to remember and deal with, and when events pop up just saying a name with no real portrait or reference point, you might not even know who it is, who they relate to, and how a decision will impact relations. Hopefully this won't be as hard to track as it was previously, and I'm aware that obviously they have other games that deal with characters since then more heavily. That really is it for the Diaries 12 to 17. I feel like the Diaries are getting less detailed over time, which is making it hard to answer the big questions about how the gameplay really works. It's actually creating a lot more questions in some instances rather than answering them, especially in the last two Diaries just now. Either way, let me know what you think of the Diaries and the video in the comments. What do you think about the Roman Senate situation? Does stuff like a health bar seem a little bit too gamey, or is it just a clearer way of displaying it in the UI? And are you getting more or less hyped for the game as the Diaries go on? I'm very eager to hear your opinions on it. And please remember, if you like this video and you want me to continue recapping the developer Diaries and cover the game with guides and videos when it comes out, please hit that like button, maybe subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with anyone you think will be interested. Thank you as always, and I'll see you in the next one.